Good afternoon. I want to welcome all of you to today's session on optimizing the use of LPR data. I want to thank you for participating. We've got about 75 people registered today, so excellent turnout. My name is Mike Levision, and I'm the CEO of Resolvion. For those of you that are not familiar with us, we are one of the nation's leading repossession management and skip tracing firms. Our services run the gamut of from forwarding to skip to repo, LPR management, comprehensive impound recovery, and we also have got a division that specializes in the recovery of heavy equipment. So that'll be the extent of the ALS Resolvion commercial today. I'm joined today by Jeremiah Wheeler. Jeremiah is the EVP and General Manager of Digital Recognition Network, better known as DRN. Jeremiah oversees all of DRN's business in the financial institution marketplace. And for those of you that are not familiar, while there are a few different LPR companies out there, DRN is certainly the 800-pound gorilla in the LPR industry. Today, over 80% of all LPR recoveries are coming from the DRN network and its data. Today's session, as I said, is on optimizing the use of LPR, both technology and data. I think most of you are familiar with the basics of LPR technology and its use to facilitate repossessions, but you may not be familiar with some of the techniques for optimizing the use of it for repossessions, and you may not be familiar with how LPR data can actually be used to support servicing and collection activities. So today we're going to focus on sort of the finer points of how to use the technology. In fact, let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to display the first one here. This is, does your institution use LPR in the following ways? And if you'll just click on that, in a minute, I'll close it out and share the results. So you can see that about 2/3 of the group is using LPR to support both, is using both live and historical data in their LPR activities, and only 11% of the group is not using LPR at all. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started then on the main part of today's presentation. I want to start by just saying a few words about the impact that LPR technology has had on the business. When it comes to the repossession aspect of the business, it's been nothing short of revolutionary. Now the data on the screen now just relates to the DRN network, but it gives you a good sense of the size and the scope of the LPR business. There's over 9 billion license plate sightings housed in the DRN database. That is growing at the rate of about 160 million new scans every single month, which is mind-boggling if you think about it. There's really comprehensive LPR coverage in over 300 U.S. markets now. The DRN network has been used to recover over 40,000 stolen vehicles. Total recovery value has exceeded $10.5 billion for all the cars that have been recovered using the platform, and that equates to about $1 million of value, recovery value per 1,000 vehicles that are placed into the system. So its impact has been huge. However, as I said earlier, LPR is not just about repossessions. It can be effectively used to support both servicing and collection activities. LPR data can alert you to changes with the customer that can help you manage risk. It can help identify changes in the likely location of your collateral, early identification of skips, and all this allows for just earlier intervention in your overall loss mitigation process. And as you know, in this business, time equals money. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremiah to walk you through some of these servicing and collection opportunities in more detail. Just one moment here.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Looking forward to going through some of these key points that we wanted to talk about. Really, it's really about using data more holistically and throughout the life cycle of the loan. And so, traditionally and very successfully, LPR has been used in the recovery arena, and we have been working over the past few years with a number of different lenders to use that data earlier and earlier in cycle to help prevent some recoveries in some cases, but more importantly, put out better, cleaner data to help reduce the days to repo. And so what we want to talk about today is using it in servicing and collections. So let me flip slides here. So there's a number of different ways to use it in servicing and collections. Reducing the fees that's associated to accounts going longer in cycle. We've helped improve insurance recoveries in a post-repo claims recovery environment by providing pictures and proof that pre-existing damages existed, as well as helping to recover stolen vehicles, letting you guys know when the vehicles are set to be exported out of the country, as well as total loss or salvage. We've had a lot of cases where, a lender is looking for a vehicle in a particular market for months and months, and even some cases years, not knowing that the vehicle is no longer even on the road, that it's been in a junkyard and pieced and parted out because it was involved in an accident. In some cases, those accidents are never reported, but in the cases where they are, we can absolutely help, get that data at your fingertips so that you can make better informed decisions in that process. And then, the other point to think about is, are you using something that helps you and your collections group know about when a vehicle is impounded? As we all know, impound fees tend to run very, very quickly up the ladder in terms of cost associated to your organization to help bail those vehicles out. And with ALS Resolvion, being there to help you get those vehicles out and front the fees and do the things that they do, it's important to try to keep that to a minimum. And so with us, providing those data insights earlier in cycle and telling you the cars, in an impound lot within 24 to 48 hours of that occurrence actually happening, it usually beats that paper notice that you would typically receive by about 2 to 2.5 weeks. And so if you do the calculations of storage costs there, it can be pretty significant. The next process that I want to talk about is basically in collections. If you look at being able to know where your customer is, we've had a couple situations over the years where we have helped lenders find cars literally less than 2 miles away, just in a separate apartment complex or a different apartment complex. Obviously, with the more subprime the loans are, the more transient the customer is going to be. And so, if you're looking, you assign an account out, and it's in a ABC apartment complex, and there's 7 to 10 apartment complexes within a 5 to 10 mile radius, you could literally look for that car as like a needle in the haystack. You could look for it for years and never find it, not knowing that it's just a few miles away. Also, making the contact earlier in cycle helps with the newfound locations that we've provided. And if all of this data is going not only through the collections group, just think about it, how much more efficient that's going to be once it reaches the recovery phase or the recovery cycle. The data that you will be providing to your vendors, such as ALS Resolvion, will be a heck of a lot better and faster to lead to that recovery of that vehicle. And in most cases, we do provide solid locations on up to 45 to 50% of your portfolio. And then there's another aspect for all of you banks and credit unions and the ones that have more than just vehicle loans on your books. If you have different lines of business such as credit card, student loan debt, and things of that nature, we have the ability in a lot of cases to overlay public records data. So if you think about your traditional comp report that produces, in my case, my comp reports, I think last time I looked was about 32 pages long, because I've lived in a lot of different places over the years since I've had that credit profile, so to speak. I've lived in a lot of different places, and so if you were a traditional skip tracer, you're going to go to those addresses on that comp report that are at the top of the list, or typically that's what skip tracers will do. They'll be within the top to the middle of the list. They're not going to go down to the bottom of the list. And so, but if you were to overlay, if I were to have some life event happen, if I lost my job, or if had something like that happen, and there was no way for me to financially support myself, I would traditionally go back to a relative, which on the comp report level, that relative would be at the very bottom. Haven't lived there in many, many years, so it would be harder to find me. But if you think about overlaying LPR data with typical public records data, it will help you bubble up the best address to go find the customer, serve the customer, collect from the customer, or just basically make contact in general. And so it's really about taking the data and looking at it as an attribute to your overall process. It's obviously not always going to be the one-all be-all fixed solution, but it will help you in that process to try to identify better information, cleaner information during the process of collections. And obviously too, with the number of scans that's being done now, 160, I think last month we hit about 172 million scans last month. It helps validate place of employment. So if you know where the person is from 8 to 5, then that would give you a really good indication, and it's a commercial location, and they park in the same exact spot traditionally all the time, then chances are they're working at that location. And so that may help you better, locate that person or contact the person, and in some cases garnish the wages if you can validate that is in fact where they're working, and locate a bank account for that individual. And then lastly the debt portfolio evaluations. We have a number of lenders that like to sell pieces or chunks of debt, whether it be collateralized debt files or deficiency balance files. And in some cases, we have some lenders beginning to use LPR data and just the analytics in general to say, what, maybe we can collect on some percentage of this before we actually put it out for sale, or the brokers and the companies that are actually going to be bidding on the data on the files, using the data to help better score it, to say what's the collectability of this particular debt file. If you use it and on a collateralized file that the cars are still on the road and that they're being seen over and over and over again, over the last 30 to 45 days, then the chances of you collecting on that is pretty high, versus maybe you just selling it off and forgetting about it. So in this case right here, it's a pretty good use case that we use a lot in our presentations, but it's not just a one-off situation either. It happens very, very often. In this case, we had a vehicle that was located in New York, over 3,100 miles away from where the car was being looked for in Carlsbad, California. And so we were able to help a lender find this car when if I'm not mistaken, they had been looking for it for 45 or 50 days in California, not knowing that the person had moved to New York. So it's a really good use case and an example of how it can be used. And so
I would add that we see this type of thing every single day, where based on the analysis of the historical data, it's obvious that the customer has moved, and in the case of a delinquent loan, means they probably skipped.
Yep, absolutely good. So, another piece to support collections. This is an example, kind of a screenshot of our user interface that lenders are using now to help. Basically, it kind of gives you that clustered citing. It gives you kind of that comprehensive report of the vehicle, where we're seeing it, how often we're seeing it, and it kind of helps you determine that. Well, you can see here, it's easy to tell that this is a residential location, and this car is being scanned over and over at this particular residential location. So in a case where you have, this many sightings or multiple sightings, and it's happening fairly repetitively, then the chances you finding that car when you assign it out to this particular address versus maybe the addresses you had on file, it's going to help you locate that car a whole lot faster and reduce the days to repo. And in most cases, when we use services like the LPR data along with ALS Resolvion's staging and recovery process, that the use of LPR, the live pickup recovery services, you traditionally see a fairly large reduction in days to repo. We've seen really good results from that. So the next slide, and my final slide here, and then I'll turn it back over to Mike. This is just a sample of a subprime lender that has been using LPR data for well over 4 years now. But when we started way back when, we kind of captured this reduction in charge-offs. They had traditionally been charging off about 4.5% of everything that rolled past 60 days past due. And it was pretty much the same exact flat stat over the past 5 or 6 years. And so they obviously did a really good job of managing to keep that flat, but they wanted to reduce it and see where they could improve efficiencies and increase the recoveries. And in this case, loss reduction savings on average of $5,000 per car. They're looking at saving about $340,000 a month, which results in about a 353% ROI on that whole process. And so if you think about that, and then you add in, the impound savings and the other data sets that they're using, it could be almost $500,000 in savings on a monthly basis, and just asset value that they're bringing back on the books that in some cases would have charged off, and that would have been a full balance charge-off loss to the organization. So, Mike, I'll turn it back over to you, and then when we get to those questions, or if we want to that question right now, we can absolutely do so.
Sure, we will address the current questions right now, and if you haven't asked a question yet, feel free to do so now. But what questions do we currently have in the queue?
Yeah, so the first question comes from Matt Knowles. How do we access tow yard and impound data?
Jeremiah, I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, so currently our lenders are using a product that we call Loss Alerts, and what that does is it's actually a product that is included in our DR Insight solution. So our DR Insight solution includes some of the screenshots that you've seen today, some of the products and features that I've shown briefly through this presentation. But it also includes loss alerts, which is the impound, export, stolen, total loss, or salvage data. And traditionally, our lenders will monitor their entire portfolio, regardless of whether it's delinquent or not. And then we send alerts through that interface, as well as through email, basically notifying you that there is some type of an occurrence that happened, whether it be a stolen, total loss, salvage, or impound. And then you can manage that from there. We traditionally will see, the police department that may have impounded that unit, the location of where it's being stored, as well as the phone number, and that way you can reach out and get the information that you need to then pass on to ALS Resolvion so that they can go actually retrieve that from that particular yard for you.
One other comment I'd make, it's a little bit off topic here, but if there are any lenders on the call that utilize GPS technology in conjunction with the vehicles that you finance, there are some GPS providers out there, Spherion in particular, that they've done something really cool. They've geofenced literally, I believe, almost 11,000 impound lots around the country. And when a car equipped with their GPS unit crosses that fence, basically crosses into the impound yard, there's a real-time notification that takes place, which can be very valuable, because even the notices that the impound yards are required to send out, that can take weeks to arrive in many cases, and at that point, a lot of fees have racked up. Theo, are there any other questions at this time?
Yes, so we have one more from Gabby Falcon. So Gabby, I'm going to unmute your mic and let you ask your question.
Oh, okay. What did you mean by convert Social Security to VIN to plate?
Yeah, so that's a process. If you think about it, public records databases like Clear, TLO, Accurate, LexisNexis, when you put in a social and you run a full comp report or you run a vehicle report, it will traditionally provide you with any registered autos for that particular individual. And so what we have is a product that, for like credit card debt or student loan debt, something that's unsecured, you virtually are finding the person, where they're living, getting a good address and possibly a phone number, virtue of where they're parking their car. So we start with a social, we go to a VIN number, and then we convert the VIN number to plate, which is what we've done for years and years, is going from VIN to plate by locating that asset. And so the social will basically convert to a VIN number based on the current registered autos for that individual, whether it be one or many. And then we produce that location information for you that basically says, here's your best 2 addresses or 3 addresses for that particular individual based on where they're parking their car.
Any other questions?
Yep, we've got 2 more questions. One is from Iron Perkins, and I do apologize if I butcher anyone's name, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic so you can ask your question.
Hello, my question is the DRN stolen vehicle data linked directly to NCIC?
Yes, it is. It actually is linked directly to the NCIC. We have partnerships with the National Insurance Crime Bureau, as well as the Insurance Services Office, the ISO. So we monitor that very, very regularly in real time.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, please.
So this question is from Rick Jerko. How successful are you with LPR data on Indian reservations?
That is a really good question, Rick. We are fairly successful where the cameras are allowed to operate. I can get a little more detailed analysis on that for you offline, but I know that we do currently have cameras operating on a few reservations, but that obviously, as we all know in the recovery industry, it takes some really strong relationships between our recovery vendor partners and those tribal councils to enable us to get on those reservations and scan plates. But we do currently have some out there. What we also do, though, is we try to make sure that around large reservations that we have a really good footprint on the outskirts of those in the cities and metropolitan areas to be sure that we can capture those vehicles if they come off of the reservation as well.
Any further questions at this point, Thea?
That's all of our questions.
Okay, let's before we jump into using the technology to optimize your repossession activity, let's take another little poll. So the question on this poll is, does your institution deploy either directly or through a forwarder the use of real-time monitoring for pre-charge-off delinquencies, post-charge-off delinquencies, or both, or your institution doesn't use it at all? So I just distributed that poll out. Please give us a quick answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it out, share the results with you, and you can see that about 2/3 of the group is using it for both. Much smaller percentages are using it sort of an isolated basis, either for pre or post charge-off, and then 21% is not utilizing live LPR at all. And I'm going to come back to that as we go through this a little bit further. But let's now talk a little bit more about how LPR data can be used to optimize repossession efforts. I think most of you are probably familiar with the basics of how LPR is used in conjunction with repo activity, but you may not be as familiar with some of the tools that allow you to make better use of it. I want to spend just a couple minutes discussing the distinction between historical and live data. We find that this issue is often not well understood by the lenders, and the results can be pretty significant. Especially lenders that work with agents directly often think that if their agents are running cameras, that they have live LPR coverage, but that's really not the case. Those agents, they may have access to their own historical data and historical scans that might have seen that vehicle, but it's not the same as being in the live system. So, historical data is that database of 9+ billion previous vehicle sightings that I mentioned earlier. In many cases, the vehicles are likely not currently at that location. Historical data can be an excellent skip tracing tool. We use it extensively in our skip operation, and the recovery rates, especially on the more recent scans, are typically in that 30 to 35% range. And so, when you're using historical data to recover a vehicle, the situation is you've gotten a notification that the car has been seen. It could have been very recently. It could have been not so recently. You dispatch an agent out to that location to try and recover the car. And in that scenario, it's like I said, the recovery rates are only in that 30 to 35% range. Live data, though, represents real-time sightings of the vehicle. It provides real-time nationwide coverage. Those cars can be repossessed immediately because they have just been scanned. The agent is literally right behind the vehicle at that point. Recovery rates in a live environment are typically 95+%, because again, the agent is right there, as opposed to having to be dispatched out to a location where the car could have been at yesterday. It could have been at two weeks ago. So it's much more powerful in that regard, but it does require the ability to provide authorization to that agent really 24/7, 365 days a year. The agent, before they're going to hook that car, they've got to have authorization and confirmation that the case is still open. A lot of this scanning activity does take place overnight, really every day of the year. So you really, to take advantage of live, you either have to provide a 24/7 dispatch, or you have to partner with somebody who does, like us. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the specialized tools and ways to use the data that you may not be aware of. Starting with picking the best address. You know, as I'm sure all of you have experienced, as the skip tracing work is done on a delinquent account, you can oftentimes have multiple addresses where this vehicle might be located. You can't really expect your agent to put equal effort into all of them or to continuously run multiple addresses. So it's important that you give them the best information that you can. And with so much data available, and data mining tools and algorithms to interpret that data, addresses can be scored as to their likelihood of success, and that information can be invaluable to your agent in helping them prioritize their activity. Here's another interesting one. It's using the data to pick the best agent. As I'm sure most of you have experienced, on any given location, you might have multiple agents that cover that and service that particular area. So the question is, which one do you choose? There's a variety of factors that we consider in making that decision, but a really important one is which agents have seen this vehicle in the past. So in this example, this is an address in South Florida. You can see here we've got literally 10 different agents that service that area. The majority of them have only seen this vehicle or scanned this vehicle in the past a few times. However, one of them has seen it, scanned it 179 times. So all other things being equal, this is probably that agent's probably the better choice. And this also highlights the importance of having the VINs in the live LPR system as well, because if you had assigned this to one of the other 9 agents, and the 10th agent, Specialized Towing, that had seen it 179 times, had scanned it again, that would have been a lost opportunity if that VIN was not in the live system. So this is a really powerful piece of data to try to determine who's the best agent to give this particular assignment to. Another powerful way to analyze the data is looking at the patterns for the day of the week that it has been seen and scanned in the past, and even the time of day. Again, the combination of billions of records of data and advanced data mining tools, these patterns are not hard to identify, and they can be extremely valuable to the agent. This slide's a little hard to read, but it's basically identifying frequency by day of week and time of day. And in today's world, where the agents are really stretched thin and are operating on very thin margins, any information that can help them better allocate their resources is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, Mike, and just to interject really quick there, we've had a number of lenders tell us how useful this heat map tool is, because it's basically, there's so many repossession assignments that you guys put out there where an agent is just running the account, at certain times of day or night, and missing the car just by minutes or hours. And if they're picking off the list one at a time, they're running additional accounts, they're running additional addresses. It may be, 5 or 6 days before they loop back around to that particular address. And if they happen to do it in the same type of, repetitive environment, then the chances of them being back at that address at the same time of day as they ran it before may be very high. And they could literally miss the car over the course of 3 to 4 weeks by hours. But if if we're putting out data that says, hey, only go by this particular address between these hours, then the chances of your recoveries increasing could be literally just a timing aspect.
Good point. The next thing I want to speak about is the use of what we call the LPR Staging Strategy. This is a great strategy for leveraging the power of the live LPR service, and it really is designed to complement the existing repossession efforts, not really to replace. So, in a staging strategy, you would make the involuntary repossession assignment just like you currently do, either to a direct agent or through a forwarder, but at the same time place it into the live LPR system, and that does have to be done through a DRN affiliate such as Resolvion. And the benefit of this is it really expands the coverage for that case. The involuntary assignment that you gave to the agent or to the forwarder, the focus of that effort is typically around where people live and where they work. LPR is focusing on everywhere else, and it also provides a great solution to ensuring that your assignment has coverage outside of the area that you think that vehicle is located, because in many cases it is outside that area. So you really get all the benefit of what you're currently doing, and then it sort of supercharges your current repossession efforts by simultaneously having it out as an involuntary assignment and in the live LPR system as well. And there's really no dual assignment conflict. In the many years that we've been doing this, I don't think we've ever had a situation where two agents happen to be trying to repossess the same car at the same time. One who got there through an assignment and maybe some skip tracing efforts that they applied, and the other who happened to just be scanning plates in a parking lot. So really no conflict there.
Yeah, and Mike, I can add to that as well. If you imagine assigning an account to a direct agent in the field, and then simultaneously that account resting in a cloud environment to where basically no other agency is going to have access to that account. However, the electronic eyes of the cameras that are running around are looking for that car, looking for that plate. And as soon as one passes, then it approves the process for them to go about validating that information, validating the VIN number of the car, and then they call into ALS Resolvion. They get a validation process going there as well to make sure that it is the right car, it is the right information, the right VIN number, and that it's still a valid repossession order, there's been no hold or close placed on that account. And then they can get the account sent, or the repossession order sent directly to their laptop in their vehicle to recover that car on a real-time basis. And so it's really like you assigning an account to an agent in Dallas, and that agent is running 3 addresses in Dallas for you, but at the same time, that account is exposed to over 4,000 sets of cameras scanning, 160, 170 million plates a month. So you really just exponentially improved the ability to recover that vehicle no matter where it goes in the country.
It's like having 5,000 more agents looking for your car at the same time.
Yep. Exactly.
This slide is just a sort of a graphical illustration of the process, but you as the lender would again make the assignment, the involuntary recovery assignment as you currently do, either through an agent or a forwarder, but at the same time provide the assignment to an LPR provider. That gets entered into the LPR hot list cloud that we call it. So you've got both these efforts taking place simultaneously. The key is, though, that once the car is recovered by either one of these channels, that it's got to be closed out in the other immediately to obviously to avoid the risk of unintended repossession. And there are, depending on what platform you might utilize to manage your repossession activity, iBeam versus iRepo versus RDN. Some of those platforms have the capability to manage the sort of dual assignment process automatically. So if the car is recovered through one channel, it'll automatically close it out in the other channel. Real quick poll on whether or not you're currently using an LPR staging strategy. Just launched that. Okay, I'm gonna close it out. Wow, almost 50-50 split. Well, let me share this so that you can see what I'm saying. You can see about half the group currently uses an LPR staging strategy, and about half does not. Just to wrap things up, and then we'll answer some of the questions at the end. I wanted to share an example with you of an ROI analysis on the use of LPR. So this is an actual real example from one of our client portfolios. Both of these columns and both of these scenarios assume that in day 1 through 15 there was no LPR deployed. So what it's illustrating is the difference in recovery rates in days 15 through 30 with and without the use of LPR. So as you can see here, we just used a base assumption of 100 cases, day 15 through 30, and we actually tested this and measured the impact for the client. We recovered about 21% of the cars, still with our agent network, but no use of LPR. However, when putting it into LPR and continuing to have it out with our agent network at the same time, we had a 26% recovery rate over that 2-week period. So 21 recoveries versus 26 recoveries. Average auction value for this particular portfolio on those vehicles was about $7,500. So you can see the difference in total auction proceeds that were generated. Now, the LPR recovery is a more expensive recovery. Without LPR, the fee was $425. With LPR, $600. So you can see there was about a $3,000 difference in total recovery cost, but that that generated ultimately on a net basis $34,500 of additional net recovery value. So that's basically a tenfold return on that additional $3,000 in cost that was recovered. And different lenders have different views about when they want to put their assignments into the system. We tend to, depending on the arrangement with the client, we tend to put them in around the 2-week period, and sometimes earlier. With some clients, we'll put cases into the system day 1. So with that, that pretty much concludes the content. Fee, what questions do we have?
So we have one question from Marissa Robles. Does this work for anything with a license plate, such as an RV?
Jeremiah, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so in most cases, anytime a license plate is spotted by one of the cameras, regardless of what the license plate is on, it will capture that information. Traditionally, the RVs, motorcycles tend to be less of a hit rate, obviously, because of where they're typically parked. And in a lot of cases, they're covered, or they're in a garage, or in some area that is backed in or something like that. With motorcycles especially, they park street side and they back into the curb, so those aren't as exposed as most license plates, but the cameras are designed to capture any license plate. So whether it be on a big rig or whether it be on an RV, we would typically capture those. And we're obviously we're happy to do a hit analysis for anyone that wants to do a hit analysis to see what we've seen of any one of your portfolios. So we'd be happy to explore that just to kind of see what our hit rates have done over the past few years with regards to recreational portfolios. And we traditionally will do motorcycle portfolios every now and again just to see how that's improving or going basically up or down. But traditionally we'll see it going up over time as our scans go up.
That's a great analysis, by the way. We've used it several times over the years where lenders have given us a file of essentially VINs that relating to cars that they were never able to find, and we're able to bump that up against that 9 billion scan database and identify exactly when and where they were seen. And the results are pretty eye-opening in many cases. There's a lot of recovery value that was missed because of it, because of not having them in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
So we have 2 questions from Rick Jerko. So Rick, I'll unmute your mic so you can ask your questions.
Hey, this
is
Rick. A couple questions. One, on the Indian plates, do you guys have any issues with getting the plate information for the LPR database, or is that not an issue?
Not that I've heard. I have not heard that it is an issue at all going from VIN to plate. Because traditionally those, in a lot of cases, are still managed at the DMV level, or at least accessible at the DMV level. And so I haven't seen those, but I'd be happy to run a test file for you to see if that is the case, to make sure that they actually convert.
Okay, appreciate that. As you know, we're in Oklahoma, right? We have a lot of Indian tribes and a lot of Indian plates. So I was just wondering how that works. Also, I think there was a question asked before, but I think we passed it. But on that heat map, it was talking, it had a lot of white areas in there where it says there was no plate hits. My question is, how do you know if you were doing plate runs at that time to know whether that's a good time or a bad time? Or is it just...
Yeah, so we do provide in the address scoring layout information, which is a different screen from the heat map, we provide the visits as well. So you can actually see over the last 30, 60, 90, all the way up to 180 plus days, how many times the cameras have actually been by that particular address. And obviously what you would want to see in a perfect scenario is a correlation of, at least, 3 to 1 or 1 to 1 in some cases where, hey, we're visiting that address and we're actually seeing the car there. But we do provide that insight. And so, if there's no sighting at the time of visit, then it will be white on that heat map. But what you're really looking for, obviously, are the blues and dark blues, because that's telling you that those are the best times to visit that particular address. And what's funny is that case in particular that we were looking at in that example, there was an additional address on that file. So that was the residential location in an apartment complex. And then there was an additional address right below that. And if you look at that address, it's actually the opposite on that heat map. It shows where we were scanning it from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and not on the weekend. And so it was a perfect scenario of work home. And so you could basically get that correlation of, hey, this is where they work, this is where they live, these are the hours they're there, these are hours they're not there. And so, and that heat map that you all saw was a home location. So you saw them there on Saturday, Sunday, but not during the week, during working hours. So,
okay,
good questions for sure. Thanks.
B, anything else?
Yes, so we have one question from Iron Perkins, and I'll unmute your mic so you can ask your question.
All right, hello again. I deal with solely stolen vehicle investigations. So my question is there some point in the future where an LPR driver may be alerted that the vehicle they just scanned is an active stolen vehicle?
I would say more than likely not, and the reason being is stolen vehicles, because they're on the NCIC list, are required to be interacted with by law enforcement only. We have always retracted those alerts from being displayed in a live real-time basis, especially to recovery agencies, because we don't want any of our drivers to get shot or killed in the line of duty for what they're doing. Obviously, they're looking for cars that are past due and not necessarily criminals. And so in a stolen vehicle scenario, law enforcement does have to get involved, and that's why we work so closely with the National Insurance Crime Bureau, because they have a number of agents on the ground, like boots on the ground in the field, and they will work directly with the task force from the local law enforcement agencies that specialize in that stolen vehicle recovery process. And so typically when an agency is alerted of that particular information, especially in law enforcement, they have guns drawn, they're ready for a fight to be put up because of the nature of the crime.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, is that it?
That's all of our questions.
All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of the session. Hope you have found this to be informative and helpful. I want to thank you again for your participation today. Special thanks to Jeremiah for his. We do one of these webinars every quarter, each of them covering a very practical topic that can help make your business better. So please keep an eye out for the next one. Last but not least, I do want to say your feedback is critical to the success of these programs. We want these to get better and better each time we do them, and the only way that's going to happen is if we get your feedback. So this afternoon, you'll receive an email with a link to a very brief, less than 1 minute survey. Really would appreciate it if you took the 1 minute to give us feedback while it's fresh in your mind. We absolutely take it seriously and incorporate it in future programs. Also in this email will be a link to the Lenders Repossession Best Practices Forum that we sponsor on LinkedIn. This is a lenders-only forum for exchanging ideas, learning about what others are doing, asking questions, getting group feedback. We also publish a lot of really interesting content, and we put it onto that forum first before we distribute it anywhere else. So, encourage you to take a look at that as well. We've got about 200 lenders that currently are part of that forum. Again, thank you very much for your participation today, and we'll look forward to you participating again in the future. Have a good afternoon.